Let me set things recording. It is important, yes. So please go ahead.
So the New Orleans Chamber started in 2004. Katrina came along, so life support. 2009, we were down over 200 members, and Dr. Charlie Teamer took over the chairmanship. And the whole board focus was on small businesses and how do you support them. And it's grown to over 1,200 members. And we don't do politics. We don't have a PAC. We don't endorse candidates. We don't do tourism. We don't do report. We partner with all those agencies. So our whole focus is on the membership. And what that's turned into is an events organization. We want networking on networking on networking, and they're looking for information. So the Chamber after 5 will get anywhere from 150 to 300 people coming out monthly. It's just, most chambers, if you're able to do 70 to 80 events a year, it's a lot. We were doing 140, we're online to do 150, and COVID hit, and they want more. So the challenge is listening to what they're talking about and trying to create that response. And then we offer webinars, and we partner with the Louisiana Society of CPAs, AMA is our American Marketing Association, and we use their experts to do quarterly educational webinars, seminars, to fill in cracks of information that small businesses are looking for. Then we've gotten into, 3 years ago, women's leadership. And we started what we call the Women's Business Alliance. They meet monthly, and that turned into a women's leadership program. And 16 organizations partner with us on that, women professional groups. LaVerne, I hear you're in on this year.
I am.
Thank you very much. Sandra was very excited. She said you'll have a great meeting.
Yeah, we did.
And each organization gets to do one breakout session, and there's 2 or 3 keynote speakers. And this year in August, they're going to just have it be kind of like a half day. No breakout sessions this year because of COVID. They're just nervous about that. But the opportunity for networking, I think it's 2 keynote sessions Sandra was talking about. But it's lifting up women in a professional setting. And I'm told by many professional women what they appreciate is not just having professional women, to say it positively. It's a different environment. Women like to support each other. And so there's only 6 of us in the office, which I think our leverage is through partnering with many organizations to try to focus on opportunities. And then the board, what I appreciate about the culture of our board is that you don't get on the board to bring something back home. You get on the board to what value can you bring to the membership. And we reinforce that with our board members positively. They own it. And that's kind of a snapshot, I think, of the work. And I look forward to going to work every day because you're meeting these exciting entrepreneurs out there that are just hungry, and they collaborate well together too. So it's good to have you in town. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Yeah. I'm LaVerne Toombs, as I introduced myself earlier, and I actually started with the Black Chamber about a little bit over 6 months ago.
She's doing great too.
Thank you, Dan. And so NORBCC has been around since 2006. So we're celebrating 15 years, and the primary purpose of this organization is to educate, promote, and support small Black businesses within the 10 parish area. The difference between Ben's organization and our organizations, their focus primarily, I believe, is just New Orleans Parish. Ours is the other 10 parishes. And so with that being said, when I took over, I was just kind of like scared to death of how we're going to be able to cover these other 9 parishes, because Arlington itself is pretty big. To be able to provide the necessary resources and being a voice for these small Black businesses. So we came up with a theme, and that is that NORBCC is a resource and a voice for these small Black businesses, because again, a number of our Black businesses, as we see it, are kind of behind the 8 ball in regards to having access to capital, marketing as well as technology. So similar to them, we collaborate with a number of our corporate partners. And we have a number of webinars that have been very successful. We also had a women's conference as well, where we focused on women who have started their own businesses, but we also have a different touch where we also focus on health. Because of the PPP, we know that a number of our African American communities as well as our businesses were impacted by PPPs. And so we partnered with an organization called All of Us Research Program. And we received a grant from them. So we're trying to show where business and health is really, basically if you're not healthy, then if your business is not healthy or you're not healthy, then neither one is going to be beneficial to you. You see your business grow and sustain. Also, we have what we call an ambassador program, and I think you all have an ambassador program, where we basically identify individuals in prospective parishes to help us identify Black businesses, and especially when these outlying parishes like Jefferson, St. Bernard, Washington, and River parishes, Terrebonne, Tangipahoa, and Plaquemines, they have a segment that's very rural. And so they don't have the same resources as maybe businesses or city businesses in Orleans and Jefferson Parish may have. So what we're trying to do is connect with financial institutions, because that's the number one thing. And how we were able to identify some of the challenges that our Black businesses are being faced with is that we did a survey. So I started actually implementing the survey when I first started, because I wanted to know how we as a chamber can better serve our members. And those are the three things that they stated. So I'm really putting a lot of emphasis on helping our small Black businesses become financially ready. And that is partnering with financial institutions and doing that even on the outlying parishes. So we have some great financial partners that have come on board. Again, we partner with them with webinars. We also partner with organizations like Oshner and Atmos and Blue Cross Blue Shield of Louisiana to introduce our small business owners to these supply diversity professionals, as well as introduce them to CDFIs in regards to the products and services that they have. Because again, a number of our small businesses make up about 5 employees or less. So with that, they're in survival mode, right? So they really don't have the time to try to figure out or establish these relationships. So we try to help them start from the top down. And that is bringing major players to the table so that they have an opportunity to introduce themselves, their services, and their products and see if that's a good match. So we've been very, very aggressive. We just started a new rebranding program when we said a new day, a new chamber, a new us. So we're on social media constantly. We increased our membership from when I started was at 164. Right now we're almost at 400.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Trying to get to 1,200 like my friend over here. And we only have 3 employees, and we just brought on a membership director a couple of weeks ago. So I can see us. Our ultimate goal is to be at 500 at the end of this year. So we've been pretty aggressive. We put out communication almost as much as maybe a little more. We created what we call a news update, where we provide grant information, procurement information, and any other type of information that we think that would be beneficial to our small businesses. We have our monthly newsletter that kind of recap also. So we've been pretty busy these last few months. But again, it's not like the chamber wasn't before, because my predecessor, Felicia Garrett, was, even though she was a consultant, she was a part-time executive director. She did a great job and left a really strong foundation for me to be able to carry it to the next level. So I'm looking forward to what 2022 has to offer. And we're trying to partner with organizations like Essence and Bayou Plastic, all the major Black events that come here to the city. Yeah.
That's wonderful. So first of all, thank you for both sharing this experience. Thank you for both for sharing. We're still done. So basically, as Jim probably would say to you, I'm much like him. I'm very much into collaboration, and I can already kind of see some ways that I might be able to be of service to you. So first of all, thank you for welcoming me to your beautiful city. Obviously, New Orleans has a feeling like nowhere else in the country, and so much of that is trying to share that with the rest of the world, both business-wise and personally, to bring more people in. My day job, so I'll kind of talk through some of the things I do and some of the areas of opportunity that I see potential. So my day job is I'm director of a doctoral program in business at a small school in Delaware called Wilmington College. And one of the interesting things about my particular program is we are the only, as far as I know, the only program in the country that programmatically solves business problems instead of uses textbooks. So that allows us to reach out and find organizations who are looking to answer questions, and we bring them into the classroom with our doctoral students and say, okay, the New Orleans Black Chamber of Commerce, they would love some additional resources. They'd love to create an entire masterclass series on marketing and promotion. So you have 8 weeks to make that happen. Or the New Orleans Chamber of Commerce is very interested in having webinars that talk about contemporary organizational strategy for its folks. And they would like that in the form of a handbook. You have 8 weeks to make that happen. And the class does that. So I think there are a number of different places here that I would love to both work with your organizations as well as work with your entrepreneurs to really help give them some resources. And I always make sure I let companies that we work with understand that these are all doctoral students. The average age of our program is about 49, so 4 years older than me. And they're all CEOs, vice presidents, consultants. They're upper echelon in their organization. So I never want people to think it's kind of like the usual college internship where kids are spending 20 minutes trying to figure out how to turn on PowerPoint. These are people who are actually making moves in the industry. So I think that's an area of opportunity. Another area of opportunity is kind of in a similar vein. I, like Jim, am a Startup Grind director in Wilmington, Delaware. And so I think that there are obviously some opportunities for us to work together through that platform, which is a large international platform, to interview and put your folks' products at the forefront of that platform. I think that the more that we can do to help really promote these businesses online in a way that millions of people can see them, especially if your company ship things, then it would be great. The other piece that I am known for doing is I'm the organizer of TEDx in Wilmington. TEDx Wilmington is in the top 1% of all TEDx platforms in the country. We've had over 477 speakers and almost 38 million views on YouTube.
Congratulations.
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah, and from a purely personal perspective, I am the only Black TEDx organizer that's anywhere near that. So one of the things that I always want to do is have a very diverse mindset in terms of bringing in speakers, but not just racially, but also locationally or geographically as well. And one of the few silver linings of COVID from a TEDx perspective is it allowed us to kind of reach out and look for speakers all around the world, and they can do their own virtual TEDx talks, and we can put them in the TEDx Wilmington library. So if one of your organizations that you work with, if someone has a great idea that's worth sharing, that's really the foundation of their businesses, you can say, hey, come to the shop, sit here in this very nice room, record it on your laptop, and we'll send it to Dan, and he'll upload that to, a TEDx platform that's in the top 1% in the country. Those type of areas, a lot of where I've kind of made my mark, if you will, at least up in Delaware, which is, it's Delaware, but we made our mark in Delaware. It is Biden country. It wasn't known for that for very long, but now it's Biden country. Is working with people to become better speakers and to share ideas. So a number of the things that I've done in terms of webinars are, how to use influencer marketing, how to understand the difference between being self-employed and being a business owner. As you know, probably, or being an entrepreneur, which is a fancy French word we like to use. But the major differences are, if I'm a small business owner, if I go on vacation, I don't make any money. If I'm an entrepreneur and I go on vacation, I make more money because I'm not messing up my own system. And so the translation from small business owner to entrepreneur is so incredibly important. And there's some really basic law, and I know I'm speaking to the choir. But there's some basic laws that you need to teach, entrepreneurs. You need to teach them, for example, the law of the architect, where no matter what, if I create a business, there should, even though I might have business partners who have equal ownership there needs to be one kind of architect who's looking at the system and kind of running things. You have a Steve Jobs and you have a Steve Wozniak, but obviously Steve Jobs is the architect. So the business ran well. The companies that try to have co-CEOs tend not to do well because one person is not focusing on the operations while one person should be focusing on the sales. We teach people about the basic laws of exchange, where there's basically 4 different types of exchange. You have kind of the criminal exchange, where I give you something and you run off and you don't do anything. You have the partial exchange, where I give you something and you give me part of what I asked for. You have the full exchange, where I give you something, you give me exactly what I asked for, and then you have more of like the abundance exchange, where I give you something and then you try to give me back even more than I asked for. And I think we have to kind of explain to entrepreneurs about these types of exchange in terms of providing value for people, so that people always refer others to them. So there's all these different basic laws that we try to teach entrepreneurs in order to become more successful. And so we've developed training materials, we've developed webinars on stuff. And through this kind of law of abundant exchange, all this stuff is free to you guys. I mean, it's basically free to you because you're from teacher. So I can kind of send these different things, or if you'd like to work together to kind of create your own kind of proprietary or at least branded materials with your different chambers, I'd be glad to work with you on that. I mean, for me, it's when you have 3 degrees in marketing and you're doing pretty okay for yourself, the best thing that you can try to do is replicate your successes that you've had. And part of the reason why I'm here, I'm not sure if Jim told you why I'm here. Part of the reason that I was here is because I'm not only was I hoping a year ago that Essence Festival would be going on live, but I just love the city, and I love the vibe of the city, and I love the culture of the city, and anything I can do to kind of give back and help in my own very, very small way, help your entrepreneurs to be more successful. Any of those different platforms, I'm certainly willing to share any resources I have.
Yes, thank you. Yes, I think that's awesome, especially with our members, and of course with Ben's members as well. I mean, every resource that we can, give our members helps them build a stronger foundation in regards to their business. There's 2 things here. One, of course, we have all these wonderful organizations here in the city of New Orleans and outline other that provide technical assistance. But for me, I've always wanted to host like a master class because I think that that's just a great marketing piece to just say attach when you say master class. Yeah. And so tell me a little bit, and then I don't know if you had anything, but tell me, kind of give me an idea in regards to the master class. Let's put that on the parking lot in regards to your response. So because I have something personal that I want to say. Okay. And that is, I've always wanted to be on TEDx. I've always wanted to have that in the background, and I'm just sharing my story with women about my journey. I've always, it's just like a dream. I can see myself doing that on a platform and just telling women about my,
Okay, you're speaking
My
to its
journey.
existence. This is
I
like,
know.
this is like,
I mean, this
I know.
is,
this is like LaVerne Ball here. She's speaking to
oh my God,
existence.
when you said, I was like, oh, when he said, I was like, oh my God, this is like a dream, this is it.
You know what's interesting about that? I'll address that one, and then I'll go back to the one you mentioned before. I think every TEDx organizer has their own way of curation, you know. And there's two major ways of curation. The first way of curation is you have a website and you basically say, hey, if you're interested, apply here, you know, and then we'll kind of vet it and do some things like that. I am much more the type of person where instead of, I know everyone has a story. Like, I know everyone has an idea in them if they, you know, unless they literally live like Castaway and Tom Hanks on an island, right? And so much more of the things that I try to do are find interesting people and say, wow, you're, you know, LaVerne, you're a very interesting person. I know you have a story. I know you have an idea in you. Let's talk about what that might be. Like, tell me a little bit about your track record, your background, where you are right now. And usually an idea will germinate out of that. I always do it that way for one really, really obvious reason, that when you record these things, you want to have the most interesting people. Sometimes people have an idea, but they're just not great in explaining it, or they don't have a ton of energy behind it, or something of that nature. So, you know, you and I will definitely talk about that. That's the easy part. Master classes are interesting because, and this is the case for all entrepreneurs, but especially for entrepreneurs of color. I think we underappreciate, whenever we teach entrepreneurship, and I've taught entrepreneurship for 18 years, we spend a lot of time, for a good reason, talking about financial resources. I don't think we spend enough time talking about social resources. And coming out of 2020, if there's anything, especially that the black and brown community have, it's a lot of social resources. I think I'm part of maybe 5 or 6 Facebook groups of over 25,000 people of color who basically just banded together, saying we need to buy products from ourselves, we need to support ourselves. You know, who knows a baker, who knows a candlestick maker, who knows whatever, we want to be part of that. And so that, in essence, creates all these pockets of people to become people who buy the product. The same is true with anyone else in any other chamber of commerce, whether they're a woman, or they're in tech, or they have glasses. I mean, there's all kinds of different Facebook groups for everything. And so I don't think, especially, so Delaware has a Delaware Black Chamber of Commerce that I do some work with. I do a lot of work with my fraternity in terms of what we do there. So I think a lot of it is, you know, we've done a couple of webinars specifically on crowdfunding and crowdsourcing, which I think is an incredibly underused skill for entrepreneurs. At the very least, I say crowdsourcing is one of the best marketing opportunities. So even if you don't fully fund on Kickstarter, now there's probably 5,000 new people who have said to themselves, this is a really great idea. I just need more of a proof of concept to give you my $10. Because all marketing operates on a 6-point continuum, which basically goes from awareness, education, evaluation, commitment, purchase, repeat purchase. So if we can at least get the awareness piece of it with some sort of crowdfunding or crowdsourcing, you're already a step closer to getting the commitment of the purchase. So the marketing plan should have equal parts social media, email marketing, and crowdfunding and crowdsourcing. And I don't think we talk about that enough in the Black community of this is our best opportunity to get funding. But that's not the community's fault because we don't really teach that in school. So you have to, so sometimes different marketing arms and different technological sources, you have to use, you know, the 1B of how you can use it, even though we're used to using the 1A. And so you just have to kind of get creative with it.
So I wanted to switch gears with y'all just a little bit and focus y'all back on New Orleans for a minute.
Sorry about that.
No. I love where these conversations are going. And I just wanted to ask each of you. So New Orleans is really a city that's gone through a lot of changes over the years. We've seen a lot of really, good and bad things come around. We've talked a little bit about, Katrina hitting, now the pandemic. What are some of the things that each of you see as the major growth of good things that are going on in the city right now? So what are the highlights that are happening in New Orleans that you're excited about? I know I'm putting you on the spot. That's what I like to do.
I guess one thing that hits me as hard as it's been on our small businesses is resiliency. That creative, entrepreneurial, looked for that next opportunity, fought for that next opportunity, went after that next opportunity. And against all odds, so many of them, but many of them have closed. The reality of there's still many of them out there, and some have actually thrived. They found a niche and they grew a business, they were able to hire more people. So I think from my perspective, I think it's a demonstration that we have the internal capacity here to respond to adversity and to survive it and learn from it and move forward. That to me is the positive aspect of it. I'm also excited about, there's kind of a line of very grassroots support systems. The 10,000 Goldman Sachs program here has been very effective. The Delgado Community College houses it, and they're committed to maintaining it. The University of New Orleans just announced that any local student that wants to go there, they will provide them that opportunity, which I was amazed given their financial situation. That you have a ladder, I think, of different forms of support system. I mean, Idea Village set in here. There's just a lot of these different organizations that have survived this experience and are out there to help the small business entrepreneur move forward with their business. The last thing I'd say about the entrepreneurs, I mean, they collaborate. I mean, it's not I win, you lose, but it's what you were talking about, giving from generosity and responding to others, that they often give more to the other group without any strings attached. And the reality of it is they equally benefit from the opportunity. I've seen that over and over. So it's the resilience at the end of the day for me. I mean, I thought Katrina was my lifetime experience, and COVID kind of put that in the background as a challenge. And I think New Orleans as a community stepped forward, and not in an adversarial way, but in a collaborative way. You didn't want anybody to sink. You were trying to help move the ball forward, giving more people access to success. And it's a challenge. We're not there yet. I think what you're talking about, financial issues are huge. Employees are an issue right now. And just the whole scare, are we over COVID? It's a new variant. How serious is that? That there's a cautiousness about this whole COVID experience that we really don't know. It's the biggest problem. But I'm hopeful. Yeah, I agree with you. 2022 is going to be the year of, just leaping forward. And I think it's the collaboration. It's the relationships that help the trust form to move the ball down the court. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Well, I agree with Ben in regards to the direction that the city of New Orleans is going. I think that our leadership did an awesome job in regards to, I guess, the thought process in regards to making sure that we follow the mandates that were given, and the people were very responsive. And that speaks volumes. So no matter if you can agree or disagree with the leadership that we have here, I think that we are going in the right direction. And of course, we're a hospitality, tourism city. in other parts of the region really rely on the city of New Orleans, even though there are those that do not give the credit that is due to the city of New Orleans. But if there's no city of New Orleans, there's no Louisiana. And you may hear people say that it's not, New Orleans is the state of Louisiana. But in regards to the African American community, a number of our small businesses, of course, pivoted, right? They reinvented themselves, and those that did that and did it well are doing very well. Mm-hmm. But unfortunately, it's a smaller percentage of those that is able to change, pivot, and do something a little bit different in regards to what they were normally do. Let me give you a prime example. Again, we're hospitality, tourism, so we have a lot of musicians, which we call them our gig workers. And so those individuals primarily are cash, right? And so because they're cash, and because of the fact that they don't really see themselves as entrepreneurs, they did not prepare themselves for this pandemic. So a number of them were impacted by it. Yeah. But there were those that are on another scale, maybe on a higher scale, was able to pivot and doing just what we're doing today, and that is webinars. And they were teaching music classes and theater and different things like that. And so now it's taking them to the next level in regards to not just being musicians, but also being those that are educators. And now they can become more self-sufficient. One of the things that we're trying to do with it through the Grammys Corporation or Foundation is to work with our gig workers and the cultural bearers, which was the Mardi Gras Indians. I'm sure you've seen them. Is to begin to think more as entrepreneurs and not just, a musician or not a Mardi Gras Indian that perform on the street and that I receive cash, but to be more thoughtful in regards to entrepreneurship. So I think that's a good thing because, again, when they are basically the ambassadors of the city of New Orleans. They're the ones that tourists come to see, come to hear, come to see, to have experiences. And I'm sure that, I don't know if you ever had the experience of a second line, but if you haven't, I would highly encourage you to do so. It is one of the most exciting experiences, and if you don't move, then something seriously wrong with you. But anyway, with that being said, again, when we look at our restaurants, right, and a number of our restaurants, black restaurants, a number of them closed. And again, we had the restaurant revitalization fund, and unfortunately, a number of our black businesses or restaurants did not benefit from that. But there are those that did, right, that stayed open, like the Kushans of the world. But again, we're trying to create opportunities where those black restaurants that are still opening, that we look for other streams of revenue for them to thrive, and even not only that, but to recreate themselves in some sort of way, and that is to pivot and continue to take advantage of what the city of New Orleans has to offer. And so again, 2022 is going to be, in my opinion, as young people would say, off the chain. And I don't know if they still say that today or not.
I think it'll be good.
Yeah, still can, right? It is, and so we're trying to position ourselves as a chamber to make sure that our black businesses stay open and take advantage of the opportunities that's going to present themselves in 2022. So I see a light at the end of the tunnel for our small businesses. And I'm glad that the Black Chamber is part of that movement. And again, even though they are considered the big chamber, we do work together and hope to do more together. Because at the end of the day, it's all about small business, it's all about entrepreneurship and growing, because we understand that every dollar that is spent in our community, 70 cents of that stays in the community. And what we're trying to do is make sure that that 70 cents that stays in the Black community, that it remains and continue to evolve and grow so that we can have a stronger community. So that's what I see.
Well, obviously, what I see is someone as an outsider and someone who just kind of blows into town every once in a while. But I think that in general, the places that have a strong culture benefit from what I call, the FOMO YOLO movement. Where people after the pandemic, they want to travel, like they want to get out. They want to get out of Dodge. And there are very few places in the country that have that type of pull of, geez, I only lived once. Where have I gone? It's in the continental United States that that I haven't been to yet. New Orleans is probably top 5 places. People aren't saying they want to go to Muncie yet, right? So I think that my apologies, Muncie. So I think that New Orleans, as long as it's prepared, I mean. The thing about American history is, in my neck of the woods, we're 2 hours south of New York, 30 minutes south of Philly, 45 minutes north of Baltimore, and an hour and a half north of DC. For most people up there, United States history was written there, right? And I think that you come down here and you realize that the history books are completely skewed and completely wrong about where people were first, where they came in, what they were doing, what jobs they had, everything from just the interaction between the Spanish and the French and the neutral areas of New Orleans. Like we don't get taught that, like not even close. I never heard of that stuff until I was in my 40s and visited down here. And I think that New Orleans, for the most part, I'm not saying anything you guys don't know. Like, we know New Orleans because of Mardi Gras, and not even the real origins of Mardi Gras. We know from Girls Gone Wild, like VHS tapes.
Oh my God!
So I'm dating myself here. Right? So I think that there's unbelievable opportunity to create something within the chambers of commerce that tells history the way that New Orleans wants to tell it. And because that narrative is different than what we've all been taught before, we're going to pay more attention because we're going to be looking to get out of the house and go to places. And I think you really touched on, I think it was yesterday, I saw a man who I assume was homeless. But the thing that was so interesting about his sign was, it didn't say leave a tip, it says Venmo me at this account. And I thought that was just brilliant. I thought that was brilliant. And I think that the thing that we can do for chambers of commerce coming out of COVID is, as we'd say back home, BAUs, like business as usual. We can work with people who are street corners. We can work with startup businesses. We can work with Black entrepreneurs to basically redefine what is business as usual. You have to have the social media. You have to have the Venmo accounts. You have to use crowdfunding. And you can, for lack of a better word, you can even almost create a web-based series of doing that for every street performer in New Orleans. And give, I'll write up the marketing plan. I'll give it to them and say, every business, the average millionaire in the country has 5.3 streams of revenue, right? So I'm not saying you have to become a millionaire, but what are your streams of revenue? Obviously, you're out here in the corner, you have a hat there, I put $1 in there. But yeah, is there somewhere we can record master classes? Is there a way to get the dollars besides me throwing into this hat? Are there online classes you can teach? I think that'd be the coolest thing in the world. What would be cooler than learning guitar live stream from a guy who's playing it in the middle of the French Quarter? Like, that is the coolest thing I've ever heard in my entire life. And there are millions of people who pay for that, but it's just about changing what the BAUs are and saying, post-COVID, it's about culture, it's about technology, and it's about target marketing. And so how can we put everyone in a position to fully get those together in such a way where you can go to every single person in the different chambers and say, who's your target market? What's the technology you want to use? And what's the basic company culture you want to put forth? And for most people, those three things will be different things, so there's no cannibalization. And then each person has their own individualized marketing plan about how to move forward. And I think New Orleans is the combination of being big enough as a city in terms of a brand, but small enough in terms of a community that you guys are one of the few places that can make that happen. So yeah, as I said, I would love to help out in any way possible, something like that, because I think I would find that really compelling to do that.
So that actually kind of led away from one of the things that I wanted to mention really quick. Oh, that's okay. That's just there, still there. That one of the things that I see with New Orleans that I'm just so incredibly excited about. This was the first week that I got to fly since COVID, and I got to see the new airport. And we were talking about this earlier. And I think the new airport is really going to be a source of economic development for the city in just so many ways. And I was wondering if you all had a couple of comments on that, just to, again, put you on the spot. Because it's something that we talked about, off camera earlier. And I think that, when you look at the major hubs across the country, that have economic development, having a vibrant airport that's really accessible into the city is such a big part of that. And now that we've renewed our airport and redeveloped it, I'm just incredibly excited about what I see coming out of that. Comments?
Everything on economic development, your airport is the gateway. It's the first impression they have of your community. And for New Orleans, it's an intermodal transportation system to the oceans, to the interstate systems. It's that multi-connection for commerce. And then with the port, there's just so many dimensions just on that one aspect. But I was just, a friend told me about a report they did on airports, 50 categories. The first 15 of the 50, New Orleans came out #1, and they were second or third in all the others. Wow. And that's the type of applause New Orleans is getting for its airport. Mm-hmm. And people like this. Breeze Air, new airline coming out during COVID, starting New Orleans is one of their choices. Southwest wants to build, Delta's back strong. It's an amazing experience to see the impact New Orleans has. And my bias right now is it's going to help New Orleans become the international connect to Europe and Asia again. We were on that track pre-COVID, but I think it's just that much better in terms of the opportunities that we have going forward. So I agree with you, Jim. I just think the airport, if I was picking one economic indicator that's a statement, statewide, nationally, internationally, it's when you walk through our airport that we're setting the bar right now.
I'm just so excited over this right now. It's like I said, I didn't know what to expect when I walked into it on Monday, and it just kind of it blew me away. It was just I remember just going, this is where we've been wanting to go to for such a long time. And I've always had this feeling that New Orleans is always on that simmering point of becoming that just major technology and innovation hub that when we compare ourselves to the other big tech hubs across the country, that we're always just at that simmering point. We're not a San Francisco, we're not a Silicon Valley, we're not an Austin, but we're right there. And that airport it was the first kind of like, again, when you're watching the pot boil, it was the first, boiling that I really saw. And I was going, okay, we're starting to really boil. And that I don't mean to detract about the other great things that have been going on in the city, because we have really rebranded ourselves as a technology hub over the last 15 years. But having that airport, it was kind of like that validation, like we've gotten there, and this is something.
Well, the city of New Orleans is not the only one that will benefit from the airport. You have St. Charles Parish, because there's a portion of the airport that's in St. Charles Parish, and then of course in Jefferson Parish in Orleans, but all the other outlying parishes and the river parishes, they're just as far as Baton Rouge and all the way up to the north St. Tammany Parish and further up. So again, there's this domino effect where these other outlying parishes will benefit from what the airport presents to our community. And I agree with Ben, is the fact that it is the gateway, it is the first impression. And the reason that I know this firsthand is because I used to work for a United States Senator. And when I would go to the airport, it was always the old airport. It was always a challenge. It was, and she would call me and just, this was just turmoil because of the airport. She didn't like the bathroom. She just didn't like the airport. And I told her, I said, oh my God, why didn't they have this airport here when you were in the Senate? I wouldn't have had to have to fight so hard during the time. But again, to be able to upgrade and take the airport to the next level, I commend the previous administration, which was Mitch Landrieu, her brother, for having this foresight and making this work before he got out of office, because this was his focus. He wanted to leave something, a legacy behind, and unfortunately, he's not going to really get all the credit that he deserves in regards to creating this economic engine that is going to be beneficial to all of us. And we can see the impacts of it as that report in GNO Inc., which is an organization that creates a lot of data that helps Ben and I to be able to articulate and talk about all the great things that we have going on in our city and our region. But I can't say enough about the airport. And again, with the flyover that's being constructed right now is going to be another added value to the airport and to our region. So I just, when I read that about the airport being number one, and then Breeze Airways and other Southwest Airlines, with this possible expansion and other opportunities too with the connections, I'm really excited about what's happening here. Anything else?
I know you all have other things to get to.
I'm just thinking about my park.
I really wanted to thank you all.
Thank you for your patience.
And I'll give you my card as well, so that you. That's what I was gonna say, Snug Harbor.
It's right on Princeton, almost.
Okay.
It was one of the original venues of music before it got out.
Oh,
It's been there forever. But the fun thing is, there's a restaurant on the left. On the right is a fun bar. But behind that is an old cabaret.
Okay.
It's very intimate. Downstairs, a balcony. And the tickets were $15.
Okay.
So totally local artists. And if you can't get a ticket, you can sit at the bar and watch the performance on their screen.
Okay.
It's a cheap date. Barbara and I, my wife,
There you go.
love it.
Two favorite words.
I'll email you. I'm sorry.
Sounds great. No worries. Thank you so much for your patience.
Jim, thanks for setting this
No,
up.
thank
We're in
you
talk very soon.
all.
Okay, we'll get you contact as we go.
Good luck with the rest of the day.
Okay, yes. Still
Good, so you're in town for Essence for the whole weekend.
Yeah, well, that was the plan, until Essence became kind of fully virtual. So yeah, that's because we bought tickets to fly out here literally last year at this time, and of course, as the pandemic would be over at that point. So, but it's no matter to us. It's just a great time. Excellent. I will definitely check that out.
Yeah, and,
It's not open across the street, they were doing performances. It was an art gallery
Mhm.
of local artists.
yeah, across the street.
Yeah, they took it over for a music venue so they could actually continue on, but it's, I read it, I thought it was just opening up in the last week or so in the gallery itself, but, yeah.
And this is
Excellent.
wonderful, and I would be, I didn't say this, I'm always promoting my Black businesses, and so
What away?
we got a Black-owned restaurant on, is it Charles? Beyond. Definitely go there, it has an awesome
Okay.
courtyard, it's owned by an African-American woman.
So I'm saying right.
Is it French Quarter or?
No, it's not French Quarter, it's,
Okay.
South Peters on this side. South Peters,
Yvonne's, it's right next to Merrill's.
yes, it's right next
And that's
to,
Gerard. Gerard, so it's between
It's-
Chapatulas.
here it is. It's, Gerard, 412 Gerard, and she opens at 3.
What's the name of the restaurant?
Here.
Oh, thank you. Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah,
Yep, I can remember that.
yeah, she's a PhD as well.
Okay,
I think her degree, I think she has a PhD in psychology.
interesting.
Yeah, really awesome. She focused a lot on mental health.
Okay, wonderful.
But not too many people know that. I just so happened to know it because she was on a webinar with us and I had no idea that she was a PhD. I heard doctor, I was like, who's that? Oh, okay. Yeah, but yeah.
I'll definitely check out all those places.
Yeah, but that's, check out the hamburger, make sure you sit out in the courtyard and have a great experience.
Absolutely, absolutely. We'll talk
It's a
soon.
pleasure. Absolutely.
Thank you all so much.
High expectations for the rest of
Yes.
the day.
Yeah, seriously.
Yes, we've still got 2 or 3 more to do today.
That's fun.
That was fun. So I know that at least 2 other people are coming today, and we missed one of them that we'll have to do as a Zoom meeting later.
Okay.
So the people from the LePage Center were for 1:30, I think.
Okay,
And so since we got a little late start,
Okay.
we're gonna do that later.
okay.
Over here. I wanted to just kind of chat with you one-on-one for a little while now that
Sure.
we've got a couple of minutes.
Sure.
So, so what's going on in New Orleans so far? So how long have you been in? Since
Since Tuesday.
Tuesday? Okay.
So kind of came in, just kind of, walked around for a bit. Like I already kind of talked about some of the favorite places we like to go with the Hotel Monteleone for breakfast. Just what was the name of the place? It's right on Royal, right by where we're staying.
The Carousel Bar.
So that wasn't when we went for breakfast. That wasn't open yet. I've been to that before.
Okay.
So we'll probably go to that in a little bit in a while. And so yeah, we'll probably try to get up to Frenchman Street tonight. So just, I mean, once again, Delaware is not a walking city, right? Everyone has a car. Everything is highway adjoined. So just to kind of walk around and people watch and listen to the music and just kind of pop in and out of different places, it's very different.
It is an interesting part of the city. The culture that we were talking about is it's so diverse in so many ways. Like one of the things we were talking about earlier, kind of on and off camera. You could literally go 20 minutes outside of New Orleans, and it's predominantly there's pockets where Cajun French is the language, and I've actually been to bars before where I think I was the only one that didn't speak Cajun French, and it was just and you're only a little bit outside of the city, so it's amazing just how things just moving from one part of the city to another. It's still the same city, but the flavors kind of change a little bit, and so like I know people go crazy over this, but right on Chapatula Street here, they've got Hanson snowballs. And if you haven't been, for a Hanson snowball, it's one of these things that I passed by there yesterday and there was 50 people outside and they're waiting for a snowball. I mean, it's crazy, but this is a thing. You'll see in the newspaper the ratings on top snowball stands in the city. This is one of the big parts of the city. And this is a lot of other things like that you'll come across. Definitely all of the festivals that we have that we've talked about. And I think next year and this year, some of the festivals are going to happen in late October. It's going to be kind of a crazy time, but I think next year, it's everything's going to go crazy for festivals because people, like we were talking about earlier, been kind of trapped inside for so long. Well, where are you going to go? Let's go to New Orleans for the festivals. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's actually, you see some really interesting things over these times of stress, and this is something that you were talking about with the Chambers of Commerce just now. The companies that have pivoted, they may have even been struggling before the pandemic, but they pivoted on something, and they're now, in some cases, doing very well for themselves. And so it's amazing to see that reaction that comes out of people. Some businesses will fold under just because of the nature, but then some of them will hit their stride because of that problems that they run into. It's one of these kind of neat times. I always think I moved back here when Katrina hit. So I was finishing up my postdoc up in Tennessee at the time, and when Katrina hit, I knew I had to move home. And I remember, just kind of watching, and in some ways it was so sad to see what had happened to the city. And then in other ways, you just saw this brand new, exciting growth coming out. And so I always kind of think about, when you have a fire in the woods, and after that fire, you get all of this really great new growth happening. And I think New Orleans has kind of continued that trend since that point.
That makes sense.
So yeah, I'm out of words now. Let's see. So where have you gone to eat so far? That's a good
one. So obviously Cushon, obviously Hotel Montelio. Trying to backtrack in my head which of the different places. There's one place on Royal that was Perry Antoine, something like that.
Got me on that one.
Something like that. And then actually it's funny. I'm just thinking back. I think we literally have had we've literally had three meals, but had been out to drink. Like the places I think I was just like, wait, what am I eating? Oh, and then what's the one that's always around? It's like Willie's Chicken Shack. Which had surprisingly good chicken. And so I've already been told that I need to go into the Treme to something Casey's, Dottie Casey's, Doobie Casey's, something like that. And then there's another one, Willie Mae's Scotch House. I have to think for it. But yeah, everyone, I think that's the ongoing New Orleans thing. It's like, so where are you going to eat?
Well, yes,
what are you going to eat?
It's a huge part of the culture here. I always kind of joke about this that chain restaurants don't really seem to make it in the city. They'll make it in the suburbs, but in the city itself, it's kind of like the chain restaurants just they can't compete with, you know, there's so many other, you know, good places that, you know, consistently will serve outstanding, you know, food. Irene's is one of my favorite places down in the French Quarter. I go crazy over the place whenever I can get down there. If you get a chance, you and your wife should go to Irene's one night. I should have mentioned that earlier while we were talking about restaurants. And then this morning you got to meet with Chris Cameron, our executive director.
Yeah, he's great.
For hands-on, and I'm on the board for hands-on. That's how I know Chris, and he is an incredibly dynamic person.
He's a great guy.
I always sit there and go, you know, somebody is, I hope not, but somebody's going to steal him from us sooner or later. I got that horrible, I hope that doesn't happen, because, you know, he's nationally good. You know, he's, you know, one of those people that really could write his own ticket in a lot of different ways. And he truly cares about what he's doing, which is, I think that's one of the things that you and I kind of gravitate towards is, you know, people that truly care about what they're doing. I've worked with people before that they'll tell me, well, you know, it's best to do the minimum amount possible because, you know, you're just going to get taken advantage of anyway. And I always sit there with that and I go, well, you're in the wrong place. If that's your attitude, to just do the very minimum that you can because, you know, you're working for somebody else and you're not happy with it, well, then you should be an entrepreneur and work for yourself. And, you know, and if you can't come up with an idea for that, then sit down and think about what do you really want. I mean, I've worked positions before where I was working for other people, and I still really believe that I was working the hardest that I could. And when I reached a point where I was going, well, I don't feel like working that hard anymore, it's time to move on. It's, you know, so I don't know, what do you think about like philosophy of entrepreneurship? Because this is one of the things that's been an ongoing with me is changing your attitude from, you know, working for somebody else to working for yourself. And a lot of people think that, well, you know, you're working for yourself, it's easier because, you know, you're working for yourself. And I actually think it's a lot harder in some ways because your own, you know, drive kind of forces you to work harder in some cases, that instead of going, well, let me sleep in today, you know, I can call in sick, you're going, oh no, I've got to get this done. You know, so you talked a little bit earlier about that, but tell me, I mean, you know, you go into a lot of philosophy on entrepreneurship. Give me some of the basics in the background here.
Well, I think that, you know, a lot of people the last 15, 20 years have gotten a lot of that philosophy from kind of basic rich dad, poor dad piece, right? Whether you are, you know, employed, self-employed, business owner, or investor. And I think a lot of my thoughts on that have been based on that book, have been based on, you know, the E-Myth by Michael Gerber. I would agree with you. I think it's I think of those different quadrants, employed, self-employed, business owner, investor. I think being employed is the easiest. I think the structure's created, the dynamic is set forth contractually. You know, you show up and do an average job, we'll pay you X. I think that being self-employed is the second easiest because at that stage, there's no real, not need, but scaling isn't the focus. The focus is more like replicating the income from another job. And in order to do that, you know, as long as you have some good marketing in place, that's not too bad in the grand scheme of things. But once you become a business owner and become an investor, it gets much harder because, it's kind of not old parable because I kind of came up with it. Isaiah Thomas used to play for the Pistons, was never a good coach. And from accounts of that, part of that was because he would go to players and say, well, just do this. Like, I could do this, Michael Jordan could do this. Like, why can't you do it? And the players would be like, well, I'm not you, I'm not Michael Jordan. So I can't do it. Whereas Phil Jackson, can sit on the end of the bench for the New York Knicks for championship seasons and watch Willis Reed and watch Dave DeBusschere, watch all these great Hall of Fame players. And so he understood how teams work together. So then he can become the most successful, basketball coach because he wasn't the star. He had to learn how to fit within a framework. And then that creates this philosophy that wins, I think, 6 championships. That wins all these championships. It might be 11 with the Bulls and the Lakers, probably like 11 championships. So I think it's harder. I think we are programmed as human beings to react in certain ways. We are programmed to take things for granted, right? Because then it takes up less mental energy. If I know that water's running and I'm safe, then I focus on the ego and family and self-actualization, basically, as is hierarchy. And we are used to being self-starters. We're used to doing things ourselves, and we're used to not trusting anyone else but ourselves. Because that's all in the DNA, it's all in the programming. So when you become a business owner and you have to, in essence, replicate yourself and give up that accountability that that you would have if you wanted to have it to an organization, it goes against our basic programming as human beings, which makes it harder.
So to narrow that down, what's the hardest part of that? And the reason I'm asking this is I guess I'm still thinking about this in a broad side of things. I'm finding out that probably the hardest part that I see is just the hiring part. When you move to that now you're accountable, because the second you hire somebody, it's one thing if your business is feeding you and your family. But it's another thing the second that you hire somebody else on and
you're responsible for their
you start becoming responsible for them also.
Correct.
And so that's I think if you I think as a business owner you should be responsible for the people that you work with, and not just responsible for their actions, but if you bring them on board, it's part of your duty to try to help them grow. And I've this is kind of an interesting point, because one of my last positions, I was actually told, well, we have you, and we know you're not going to go anywhere, so we can basically treat you badly.
Right.
And it was one of the strangest things. And I remember just sitting there going, well, sooner or later, no matter what, I'm going to leave.
Right.
And sooner or later, when I leave, I'm going to be an ambassador for your program, your business when I leave.
Right.
And so there's either one of two ways that this can happen. Either, I can leave and say, well, they really helped me to grow in a lot of ways, and I had to move on because of this, and this, but this is a great place. You should consider going there. This is what they do for you. Or you sit there and go, this is one of the worst experiences of your life. The only reason that you would ever go there is if you don't care about your career.
Right.
And so it's always amazed me. So I always, think that there's an obligation for, an employer also. We talk a lot about, if you're working for a company, the obligations that, the employee has. Okay, well, I'm contractually obligated to do these things because I get a paycheck at the end of the month. But beyond giving a paycheck to an employee, I think that there should be a lot of responsibility for a company or an employer to sit there and understand the needs of the employee and at least try to meet those needs.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can't, then you furnish opportunities for them to go in those directions.
Correct.
I'm really fortunate to work with a company right now, and that's one of the first things that they talked to me about was, well, these are the needs that you all have expressed to us. And I got to tell you, I was just shocked at the attitude, and it was so refreshing.
Mm-hmm.
That I sat there and said, okay, I'm in on this project, 100% because of this, and it's really because of the attitude. It's not, well, we just want you for X amount of dollars, and you're replaceable.
Mm-hmm.
So tell me a little bit, about from what you see about the dynamics that go on there.
So, kind of unpacking those different things.
It's a lot.
So I'll start at the top and I'll move down. So from the entrepreneurship perspective, the things that you need there are trust and patience, right? Because when you start to make the movement from being self-employed to being an entrepreneur, and you hire, to your point, you hire people, it's only really then will you know if your business was priced in the right way, right? Like it's like once I hire someone for, I'll make this up, for $40,000 a year, but they have to, basic restaurant philosophy, for that 40,000, they have to produce 120,000, right? For this whole thing to work. It's such a necessary part of scaling a business just to make sure that everything's priced. And this is usually the point where most entrepreneurs say, oh wow, I'm undercharging for this product. Because in order for this to work, I have to be able to hire this person for $40,000. So I think that the trust and patience piece is by far the hardest part of scaling it, with the understanding that you have to invest in something. It is an investment. And just like all investments, there's going to be ups and downs, but the thought process is that the mountain chart will go up.
So that's really interesting, because I know this from my experience, but is there a chart out there where you plug and play with the numbers and say, okay, this is my revenue, this is how much my employee, I'm going to pay them, per hour, per year, and how do I figure it out to make sure that I'm not, undervaluing my product?
Well, I think most people, they'll do that with, so obviously every company is going to be different, but most people do just basic Excel spreadsheet, right? You're able to put in what your sunk costs are, what your variable costs are, and then what the revenue looks like. In a lot of cases, you can interchange the research on product development with hiring a person, right? So basic product development says, I have this product, and to start with, there are sunk costs there, so I'm working at a loss. And that product goes through a stage of kind of growth, maturity, and then decline, right? Basic product life cycle. Well, all employees are like that too, right? As they're working, you spent a certain amount of money to interview them. You didn't get paid for that, so now they're there. Now they're going to go through a certain level of growth in terms of them learning about things. Then they'll hit a maturity state where if you are highly specialized in what you want them to do, they know all that stuff. And then unless certain things happen, they'll go through some level of decline. Like they start to take for granted the work and it goes off, or they're overworked and it goes to decline. And so that's why, for the most part, the hardest part after you have the employee there is just simple motivation. So whether that's the occasional happy hour, whether that's the occasional gift card, whatever that looks like, you have to kind of keep them at the maturity stage as long as possible without having them hit the decline stage. So if you think of every employee almost as a product, the reason why all products go through maturity and then decline is because of competition. So for employees, the competition is a better job, less hours, working from home, whatever that is. And so, as as friends of mine said, especially I know, like growing up, not growing, like let's say 10 years ago, I've had female friends who say, the best guy to go after is one who's already taken. because you know he's actually has something going on. And so the same way that some companies, for better or for worse, will say, the best, why would I want to hire someone who's not already working for somebody?
So I've heard kind of the opposite to that.
Really?
A lot of times, because when you hire somebody like that, you're hiring basically somebody else's problem.
Yes and no. I mean, you could be hiring someone else's solution, because in essence, it depends on how much well, every business, every solution costs something. So let's say easy example. Let's say I'm a logistics teacher at a college, okay? And so I might make whatever, $80,000 a year. But if Amazon wants to hire me to do logistics for Amazon, that might be an $800,000 a year job. So their solutions cost more than the school solutions. Right. And so in that case, you're hiring a solution, but you just have a bigger bandwidth of revenue to be able to pay for that solution.
And again, in those cases, that if you're the college paying $80,000 a year, you have to still be able to compete with Amazon that says, okay, we can pay 10 times more. So how do you do that? Well, the secret is, again, you've got to make your employees happy. As you show them that, here there's an environment that, you can, again, one of my favorite things at the college system is the ability to still innovate with new ideas.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's something that, has always been kind of entrenched in me in the lab system. And I've got varying degrees on that, because I do think that, again, if I were to come up with a brand new idea while I'm working at the college should have some stake in that if they're providing resources to them.
Right. Mm-hmm.
But if they're not, then, well, I don't see why. If I came up with this idea while I'm working here, so I'm on the fence with that. If the college is providing, the patenting on a new idea that you've come up with, of course they should have a stake in that. Mm-hmm. But if it's something that I've just completely come up with on my own, that it may relate to my work, well, I'm touchy on that. I still say, and I look at that as, that should be a strong point of why, working in the education system would be preferential to making a lot more money working for an Amazon, because, hey, you came up with a new idea for Amazon, and again, Amazon should, in a reality, they should say, well, this was a really good idea. It's going to make the company this amount of money. And yeah, we want to take this and run with it, but we're going to make sure that you're well compensated for that, not just, oh, well, thanks a lot for the idea, and you can leave whenever you want. Right. And I've seen, those sides of it before too. And again, I think that comes back to the responsibility of an employer. Mm-hmm. Is, instead of being ruthless with an employee that's really, generating an income for you and progressing your company, you should sit there and say, okay, we see what you're doing. Mm-hmm. And the thing you hear all the time is like, well, when I applied and got another job and I went to go see the manager, they said, oh, well, we can pay you more. It's too late now that you worry, you weren't worried when I didn't have another job about what I was doing.
Right.
But now that I've gotten another position, well, we've taken notice that we can, well, no, it's always, in my opinion, best to move on at that point. Never sit there and say, oh, well, you'll match that. Okay, fine.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I think, and you kind of touched on it, for every employer, whether you're a small business or a larger company, you have to know what drives the employee. I had a former manager when I was an intern in college, and he had a giant rock on his desk. And the rock, so if you were sitting there and he's sitting here, the rock was kind of on the side of the desk. And so he made himself look over the rock, and basically everyone's rock was wherever they were working there. Some people were working there for a paycheck, some people were working there because they love their kids, some people were working there to get out of their house, away from their spouse. Like everyone had a different rock. And so he would force himself to look over this one at the desk and say, why is this person here? If I don't know, I need to hightail it and figure out why they're working here. And so with that being said, there are plenty of people, faculty members who will say, you know what, I have job security, I'm making exactly what I want to make to be able to retire in the fashion I want to retire. And now there's a ton of uncertainty because obviously as human beings, we are much more likely to be skewed by uncertainty than take economic gain. Like every single study says that. So I think that there are really opportunities there that you just, as long as you know your employees very well, then that won't happen as often.
I agree. It's such an important point to this whole thing is to understand. And in fact, I think you and I have talked about Daniel Pink's book,
Yeah.
Live.
Mm-hmm.
I had a friend of mine, Jim DeClo, who was the one that suggested this to me because I had at one point put together a proposal, and I thought that the faculty would love me for this. And it turns out that they were like, well, you just gave me more work. And, I was telling him this one night in Salt Lake City, and I said, I just don't understand this. And he goes, no, you need to read this book. You need to read this book. And I read through the book, and I was like, wow, you're right. You need to understand what drives people. Cool. I was going to say we've got 10 minutes, and you've got Lyle LeBlanc coming next, who is let me see.